Hello, everybody. Welcome to my second 2018 movie review of the year. Today I'm going to be looking at the film Black Panther, which is probably the biggest film so far this year. It's certainly made more money than any other film this year, and it's probably the best reviewed movie so far this year as well. I wouldn't check on it, but it's very, very early in the year. And a lot of people are asking, can this film do what Wonder Woman couldn't do? Can this film become the first superhero movie to be nominated for Best Picture? Um, and that's kind of a loaded question. There's a lot of elements to be considered with this movie. Um, Let me just make one thing perfectly clear. I am not what you would call a Marvel fanboy. I'm not a DC fanboy either, so put down your flames and pitchforks. I enjoy movies for good movies. I have not seen most of the Marvel canon. I only see the ones that are getting very good reviews. I've seen this film. I saw the Avengers. I saw the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I don't see a ton of these movies, but I saw this one because it was getting praised left and right. And people said this could actually be a Best Picture nominee. Now, of the Marvel movies I've seen, I could totally see a case for this, first of all, being the best Marvel film. Like, if you want to say it's the best Marvel film, totally. It's a very, very good film. Okay, here's where we get to some tricky stuff, because I genuinely hesitate to say anything bad about this film, partially because I know that fanboys will come after me. Look, this film... So I think the best way to describe my feelings on this film is to talk about a certain quote that Jimmy Kimmel had when he hosted the Oscars a couple of weeks ago. He said, regarding both Wonder Woman and Black Panther, he said, "I remember a time when the studio said no one would pay to see a superhero movie starring a woman or a person of color. And the reason I remember that time is because it was March of last year." Now that was really interesting because so many moviegoers are seeing this kind of film for the first time, and it's a big moment. Like with Wonder Woman, women had not seen themselves as the star of a major superhero film like that ever. It was a tremendous moment. It was part of a movement. And the same thing can be said with Black Panther. Black Panther is a great movie. But basically, it's a superhero movie with an all-black cast, pretty much. There's Andy Serkis and Martin Freeman, but it's like if it's a film that speaks to the black community and to the African community, and I worry about saying anything that might offend anyone. I enjoyed Black Panther for what it was. I thought it had very good production design. It had good pacing. I remember the characters. It had good acting. I really like the villain. Michael B. Jordan's character is great, and I loved his performance. It had some interesting stuff, and I liked how the villain's motivation, because a lot of the times in the superhero films, the villain's motivation is just, oh, I want to take over the world, or I want to cause the death of man, or yada 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 evil. But in this movie, the villain actually has a totally legitimate point, and I would not be surprised to see that a lot of people actually agreed with the villain. So Ryan Coogler did a great job directing it. The script is good, but I'm not going to say it's a flawless movie. Early on, it was a little bit tricky to get into the world building, and I don't know, action superhero movies, they're not exactly my cup of tea. I enjoyed this more than most action superhero movies. It was a very good film, but I'd like to stress that a superhero movie has never been nominated for Best Picture. And the few superhero movies that I think you can make an argument for are worthy of being Best Picture nominees are films that do something beyond the genre. Like with The Dark Knight and Logan. Both of those movies I feel were worthy of Best Picture nominees. They were worthy to be Best Picture nominees. And the reason for that is they were intense, dramatic films that just so happened to star superheroes. And like they felt like tragedies, like real emotional tragedies, and they just happened to be comic book characters. Black Panther didn't quite have that same feeling to me. Um, but with that said, if this film is nominated for Best Picture, I would not complain. I feel it's a great movement. I look forward to seeing exactly what it gets. Rachel Morrison, I actually think her cinematography for this film was an improvement over Mudbound. Um, Although she does need to work on occasionally the opening scene of Mudbound and the opening of this. There are moments when it's a little too dark to really make out what's going on, but keep at it. You're getting better and you're getting good work. And she's the first woman ever nominated for a cinematography Oscar, so big deal. That's not sarcastic. That's a genuinely big deal. Yeah, it is. It is a good movie. It's a movie I'd be open to seeing again. It it's very well as great sound editing. I'm sure it's going to be nominated for that. Possibly sound mixing, possibly original song. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of stuff going on in the text. But the most important thing to consider when people talk about this film as a Best Picture contender, people need to remember we have not seen any of the other movies that are going to contend. Like, we don't know what the other Best Picture nominees are going to look like. And we don't know in like 8 months' time how many people are going to be still talking about Black Panther. By the time we get to next year's Oscars, I mean, it's possible. Don't rule anything out because we saw Get Out happen, and we also saw Mad Max Fury Road happen. And those were movies that came out early in the year that seemed so far removed from what the Academy likes to nominate, but both were remembered, and both were really well praised. So that's the trick. If you've got a movie that seems like it's not going to be nominated for Oscars, and you want to be, release it early and get the buzz going as early as possible. And the buzz for Black Panther, I think at Awards Circuit they made the argument that that film's FYC campaign started out at the Oscars. That it started with them saying that people praised Black Panther the whole time, and they were almost daring the Academy to not nominate that movie for Best Picture. I don't know, I think Get Out came closer, but then again, some people might be like, oh, we did Get Out, it might be arguably kind of similar. It's a really complicated process. For what it's worth, I think Black Panther is a good film. And I think it's really exciting to see a superhero film with an all-black cast and to see it make this much money and be so beloved. It is great for that community. But the Academy usually doesn't like to nominate these kind of movies. Now, they're smart in that they didn't spend too much time on expanding how this film relates to the more complex Marvel universe. But it is worth pointing out that it is a Marvel Universe film, and they talk about Thanos in the end credits scene, and there's a Stan Lee cameo. So some of the Academy might be like, oh, it's good, but it's a comic book movie. It's a Marvel comic book movie. A lot of people just aren't going to take it seriously, and I find it maybe a little bit hard to believe that they would nominate this for Best Picture when they didn't nominate The Dark Knight back in 2008. I feel if there was ever a time for a comic book film to be nominated, it was The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight came really, really close. The fact that it was only 5 nominees at the time might have had something to do with why it wasn't nominated. So, I'll hold out hope for Black Panther. I think Black Panther can do it. But before we call it, let's just make sure, let's just wait and see what other movies are going to come out this year. Let's wait and see what else it's going to be competing against. We can't just say, like, if it doesn't get nominated, I know a lot of people are going to complain, like, oh, I can't believe Black Panther wasn't nominated for Best Picture. What else did the Academy nominate? And they didn't see any of the other movies that are nominated. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I think this could be a Best Picture nominee, and I think it would be a worthy Best Picture nominee. And I think Michael B. Jordan would be a great Best Supporting Actor nominee. I think it could find a home in production design, costume design, makeup. I'm a little bit hesitant on visual effects because the visual effects in this movie were not great. That's a bit of an issue with Marvel movies. They make their movies so fast that the visual effects always look a little bit cheap. But I digress. If you haven't seen Black Panther, I recommend it. I think you sort of have to see it because it's part of the movement. It's this big cultural phenomenon. Like, everyone's already talking about Black Panther, so there's no point, there's no reason why you wouldn't see it at this point. Great film, and I do recommend seeing it in theaters, as being part of the experience. The theater I went to, it was half and half white and black audience, so that was interesting. Yeah, Black Panther, see it if you haven't already.